We are at the tail end, and I know there were still a few folks standing with questions, but I think it's really important to, as we did this morning, reflect on the past 3 days, everything we've heard, everything we've done together. I know some of you are still outside and this room has dwindled, the number of you all, but I think it's also really important to show gratitude and say thank you to every single one of you and those that are not in this room but have been in these rooms the last 3 days. I want to say thank you to California, Long Beach, for hosting this year's convention. I think it's also really important to recognize the folks in Los Angeles and what they've been teaching everybody across the country and how do you resist La Migra, how do you resist ICE, challenge fascist policing states or tactics, what it is to fight for justice. So I just want to say thank you. If there's anybody here from Los Angeles, we need more people in this room. It's really cold in here, right? It's so cold. But I also think it's important to say thank you to everybody across the country. And I want to say a special thank you to the folks from Florida. Anybody from Florida here? My people? There we go. And Texas. Yes, there we go. But of course, everyone else. When we face cruelty, it is your persistence in this fight that really lights the fight for everyone else. So we see you and we stand with you. How many of you know how many Latinos there are in this country? 66 million. So there are 66 Latinos in the United States, but we are not in the margins. We are the United States of America. Some of us have been Latinos way before this land was the United States of America, right? And some of us are first generation building a new legacy in this country. We are proud to be Latinos. Being Latinos is in our DNA, it's in our culture, and it's in our roots. But most importantly, it's in our humanity. I want to say that this fight that we are seeing is not a soul fight, and I think that's really important to share and explain. As it was being just recently shared, right? What we're seeing and the taxes that are being used towards Latinos, one has been used in the past, but it has been used, and it's being used towards the Black community, LGBTQ plus community, women, right? Anyone that doesn't subscribe to their ideology. And so I think it's really important that we today come together as LULAC, as people, but understanding, right, that this fight is bigger than us and that we need to find our common allies to fight in this together. The last thing that I want to say is that to build inclusive communities and spaces is understanding the strength that we have in our diversity and that we cannot allow ourselves to be divided. So I want us today, right, I'm going to now pass the mic to Carlos, and I know there are still some questions, but to really think about how do we mobilize our base? How do we mobilize people in our communities? And it can be our just family members. How many of us know family members that didn't quite do what we thought they were going to do at the voting booth last November? And that now are starting to say, oh, oops, I regret what I did, right? And so now we are in the situation that we're in. And so the question to all of you, right, is how do we mobilize people to fight against the fights that we are seeing in our community? And the power will always come from the people. As our friends in Endelon say, solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Nobody's gonna come to fight for us. Not even Superman, right? The dude who plays Superman is going to come fight for us. We are the ones that are going to fight for ourselves. So just think about that. And I'm going to pass it now to Carlos, and we're going to just entertain some questions, but also ideas. And we'll finish with just talking about how do we move forward and how do we continue to build power, show our power, and resist what we are seeing that is happening in our communities.
Thank you. All right, so this is like my 5th time speaking at this conference, so I'm not going to speak for too long because I think I've already said everything I wanted to say. This is mostly going to be just a community forum type dynamic where if people have questions or anything they want to talk about, I think conventions are really cool in the sense you get to learn a lot, you get to hear from people, be inspired, but I think it's also equally important to hear from the people who are participating, what they think worked, what they think didn't work, what they would like to see different, or just things that aren't being talked about. Because, as many of us know, our community is just so diverse and we all see things from a different perspective. And even, whether it be around nationality lines or state lines or whatever it may be. So maybe people in Florida are seeing something that people in Texas aren't seeing, people in California, people in Washington. So really just to have an open conversation about anything that you feel hasn't been addressed or you feel that was addressed and you want to address further and just kind of go from there. So other than that, I'm just so happy to be here. And I think now, I don't know if someone's going to be like passing mics around or I just throw them around the room. We can do it either. Oh, I think there's actually, are these microphones on right here? It's like a town hall. You just stand up and start speaking. A ver. I think they're a little bit high though, at least on this side. Thank you. You want to sit up, stand?
We're going to do rock, paper, scissors.
What I was going to ask in the last session, my name's Mallory Rodriguez, and I'm from Wisconsin, and what I was going to ask, something that he had said that really stuck with me was it's really hard to separate your political activism from your professional life, and I work for one of the largest insurance companies in the country, who leadership asks us not to be controversial and political because it negatively affects their image, they feel. So I want to know, we are free to do what we want, but we're not necessarily free of consequences. And this is something that I've been talking a lot with other colleagues and professionals that work in other industries. They're not speaking up about these things because they know the consequences are coming in terms of whether it be being terminated or being demoted and things like that. So I just want to know, how can we deal with these consequences that seem inevitable?
I can go. Well, I think the first thing is realizing everything is political in one way or another. I think people just don't realize it. But, you said you work in the healthcare industry. When someone dies because they don't have the ability to get affordable health care, or whether they can't pay for their treatments, that's all political. When you can't send your children to school because you don't have the money to do so because tuition is so high, that's political. Everything is political. I think one thing that's very complicated, though, is knowing when to be political and knowing when to kind of, toe the line, because that is, in a way, learning how to play the system. And once you get into those rooms where you have more power, then you can start, expressing your viewpoints and being more open about it. And I say that because I've learned, over the years, I used to be very like, I'm going to speak out every single time. And there are times when it's better to just kind of, let things go, not because you don't care about the issue, but because you need to get in an even bigger room, so when you do express yourself, you have more power and you have more influence, or finding out ways of doing it that are maybe not so, frontal, but are still, whether it's like organizing your coworkers or having, addressing people in a different way. But I think never losing sight of what really matters, which is, making a change for your community. It's about adapting the environments that you're in. And obviously, the way you speak and act at a conference, LULAC conference, is going to be very different than how you speak and act at your workplace. But it doesn't mean you're a different person. You just have to adapt to your different environments. And just finding that voice in you and expressing it whenever you can and whenever you feel it's appropriate. But if you do find yourself in a position where they're like, you can't do anything at all, then maybe consider, finding somewhere else or just what you want to do, whatever you think is the best decision in your case.
Yeah. And I want to offer also two things. So sometimes the most powerful thing that we have is our stories. And sharing our stories and talking about our personal lives is very powerful. I've seen myself being a former dreamer and being one of the individuals that helped bring out the dreamer movement. It was through my story and sharing my story that we were able to gain that power. And why is it so powerful? Because your individual lives and what you're going through, nobody can deny. And as an undocumented person, when I would say I am an American without papers and I feel American in my heart, nobody could deny that. So there's power in that, and there's also power in asking questions. Why? Why? So a lot of the times what I tell people is I am not here to win a debate trophy. This is not debate club. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm hoping that you open your mind and plant a seed of just asking that question, right? So I do believe that it's critical that in today's age, we ask ourselves, when is it gonna be enough? And I know that some people are in survival mode. I know that people depend on their jobs in order to be able to afford their houses, their cars, their bills, etc. That's completely understandable. But when is it going to be enough? And is it going to be too late when you feel it's has been enough? So, like Carlos said, right? You don't have to burn down every single place, and you don't have to come with the rage and the anger that we feel, right? It could be as simple as starting with your story and sharing how the policies and the things that are happening are affecting you and your family and your inner circle, your community. And there's a lot of power in that. And also, I do believe in the power of social media. I think that the work that Carlos has done has been a game changer to our community to inform folks. And we need more good information out there. So I ask every single one of you to become, right, good informants for our community and use that power, because there are individuals and people that I will never, ever, ever, maybe Carlos can get to, right, through his social media channels, but there are people that you are trusted more than anyone else. So you have power and your voice matters. And in your employment, I'm sure there's a lot of people that look up to you. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are looking for guidance, and you can be that guidance that provides that for them.
Thank you, guys.
Hello. So I just want to say first, thank you, Carlos, for like all the content you've been saying on behalf of like our community of people and just everyone who has been like really sad and probably lost of what's been going on. It's been really nice just to see your content like informing us and also just uplifting us in these very confusing times. So just want to start off with that. Another thing I wanted to mention was on top of being an informant in our communities, I've been working alongside with a group of organizations like Power Numbers, Paramount Chamber of Commerce, and a couple of other students that have also been a part of Long Beach. And one of the things I've noticed while we've been like letting community members and local business workers know about how to protect themselves and be aware of their rights is that a lot of the older folks have been feeling like this sense of dread and just like hopelessness, because despite of everything that they've been doing and hearing from everyone like how to protect themselves, they're like saying, but where's the change that we're seeing? Because like so much so they've been living all these years and it feels like their voice is being muted, or just they just feel like they're gonna keep doing their best, but they still feel like, well, at low key, like what's the point? And so I just want to know what is one way, or what do you have advice on saying that when we're speaking with these people in person and letting them know that there's still like hope, there's still a lot of work that we can do as like the future generation and also the people who are pushing to make progress in our communities.
Okay, that's a complicated question. Because it is hard to be optimistic right now with everything that's going on. So I think the first thing is just, accepting that, yeah, things are messed up right now. And I have that conversation with a lot of people because they'll look at me like, Carlos, when are things going to get better? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't give you false hope and say, oh, next month, if we do this, things are going to get better. There's no guarantees. And I think the quicker we come to terms with the fact that we are in I would say unprecedented territory, is the quicker we'll understand the reality we're living in. That said, I think the best way to have optimism for the future is looking towards the past. I mean, many of the things we're seeing right now are things we've already lived through. Maybe we didn't personally live through it, but our parents lived through it, grandparents, and we've always made it out one way or another. So, de que vamos a sobrevivir, vamos a sobrevivir. That's, we're not going to go extinct, and no matter how they try, I mean, we're going to stay here, we're going to be here, and we're going to thrive here. But obviously, we're going to suffer along the way, and it's going to be hard, and there's going to be a lot of challenges. But I would say, yeah, I've noticed there's many Latinos, especially, first and second generation Latinos, who just fundamentally don't understand the history of this country and everything that has, as a society, we have struggled through to get to the point that we're going to now. So we feel like, hey, this is horrible. It's something we can't get over, but we can get over it. And I think if we are informed and we understand that this is all part of a process we might not understand, and also, just like Gaby mentioned, holding each other accountable, the change starts with those family members who, not to get super, super political, but the reality is 48, 49% of Latinos supported what we are now seeing. So if we want to create that change, it starts with having those hard conversations. And I've had many of those over the past few months, people who even voted for Trump, and now they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, what you should do is next time you vote, maybe be a little, think things a little bit better before you actually make a decision. And that starts with us being educated, with us, reaching out to those people and seeing each other face to face and having those difficult conversations that need to be had. But at the same time, when you talk about the older generations, I think the hope in the future that there is for them is that their kids and their grandkids can be better off than they were. And I think, despite everything, we are achieving that. The fact that there's so many young people at conferences like LULAC that are able to go to places like this, to go to Washington, D.C. and other places, is a victory in and of itself. So I think even in these moments of desperation, of so many issues, trying to find those small victories and say, hey, I know all this stuff is going on, but at least my children get to be at this conference, and my children get to go to school, and they get to have a better opportunity and better future that maybe I didn't get to. So always trying to find the positive within the negative is a good way to keep moving forward.
Thank you.
Hola, so my name is Marco Alcantar. I'm from a farm here in Cali, and what I've seen a lot of I see them being overworked, really horrible living conditions, and it's been for so long. Like to this day, I don't know, it's just, even my grandpa has talked about it, and it's always just been super sad how like there's no help to them. Also the field workers. I've worked in the fields, I've worked in ranching myself, and I've also worked at groceries, and I worked in the grocery market as well. And something that I noticed a lot with the Hispanic community was that they would by the quote unquote leaders, they would put so much hate on them, and they would stay silent. I was always like, oh, why are they silent? Why can't they stand up for themselves? And then I turned and I was like, oh, they have to feed their families. And it was just really sad to know that they can't really speak for themselves. And whenever I would try to speak up for them, they saw me as a kid. They're like, oh, you're just 17, you're 16. Like, who cares what you have to say? You don't know what's going on here. And it was just really sad. But what can I do moving forward to help my community? Because these ranchers, the ones that I've known, they don't have papers, so they can't vote. And they're also scared to even say, like I said, specifically the ranchers, the bosses, they know each other. So let's say you go against and you want to press go against your boss and be like, oh, you know what, this isn't just, make a report on it. You truly can't, because that boss knows other ranchers. So when go to apply to another ranch, they know of you already. So it's really scary to, there's a really scary thing going on. And I just want to know what I can do to help them.
I'll take this one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Marco. I think one of the most important things that we need to do is recognize that when we have tried to justify our humanity, we have tried to do it, trying to justify it through our labor. And while our work is worthy, the fact that we always would talk only about ourselves as products of productivity and missing the humanity piece of it has allowed for this to happen. And so I think it's a lesson for all of us to understand that when we are having this discussion about power and productivity and what our community that, as we know, majority of them are the ones feeding this country, that are the ones who have worked their selves to the bone, right, to provide for their families and don't have right now anything to show for. We were together at Unidos and we were talking and I saw this message about what the president had said about our community and was saying that we were built in a certain way where our backs wouldn't hurt. Of course our backs hurt because we're humans. And there's this perception, right, that has been taken away from us about our humanity. We have to own it up and we have to fight for it. And that's really, I think, at the center of this and why I believe that individual stories are so powerful. And Marco, I started organizing like you as a teenager. I didn't know the risk. I honestly didn't understand. But I was telling folks that I was undocumented. And I did have ICE come after me in 2006, and they raided my home, and they took my parents, and they took my sisters, and they told me that they would release them only if I promised to not to continue to speak to the media. And I put my fingers like this behind my back, and I said, yes, I will not talk to the media anymore. And as soon as we got out of there, we went to our attorney's office and we had a press conference and I talked to the media and I shared and I said, what they're doing is wrong. And not only that, even though I couldn't vote, I had the ears of presidents, of legislators, of senators. They were asking me. I introduced Senator McCain when he was running for president in 2008. They wanted an undocumented dreamer to introduce McCain. I have been asked, and this is the first time I'm publicly sharing this, I was asked to introduce President Obama, and I said no. And I said no because I was, at that time, trying to pass immigration reform in 2013, and I knew that I would lose my credibility with Republicans if I did that. And I was an undocumented person. No amount of papers is going to ever tell me my worth. No amount of papers is ever going to tell you your power. It doesn't matter if you are 17 or 70 years old. You have power. And what the Dreamer movement and young people in this country and generations, we're not talking just about dreamers. Every major movement that we have ever seen in this country and in this world has been led by the youth. So you have power. And don't forget that our elders have wisdom too. And together we can do so much. So I believe in you, Marco, and I believed in me, so much so that today we have a program called DACA. How many of you know about that, right? Yeah. Right? We did that. The community did that. Young people did that.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank everyone, LULAC, for sharing this space. Not just shared dreams, but narratives that which create resiliency. So my name is Janet Bernabe. I am the foundation president for Riverside, LULAC of Riverside 3190. So I'm here to represent Riverside, the IE. I wear many hats. I'm also part of the League of Women Voters for Riverside, and I'm also part of the Secretary of State Office LAC Board Committee for a reason, because I see the injustices along the way in my work. I've been doing nonprofit work for the last 7 years, which I've been blessed to do the work I love and defend my immigrant community. I'm currently the executive director for El Centro del Inmigrante. I'm partially accredited representative for the organization, which I'm the first one, working on additional reps. But we are seeing the big dynamics that's hitting the Inland Empire with ICE rates. We gotta keep being resilient, educate ourselves, our family, our youth. They're the new resiliency. But also overall, holding elected officials accountable. I know we talk about elected officials, but we tend to give or agree on certain things, like a piece of a pie, and then they take 75% of us. Time and time again. Enough is enough. And it goes back to, civically engagement. How do we get civically engaged? This came a long time ago. One of my friends called me a bruja because of the work that I do. I was helped my parents, my mom, my tia, my brother-in-law become citizens. And even to this day, they carry their citizenship, their passport. This is not what it's supposed to be like. This is not what I signed up for. But I'm here. And I learned my upbringings from a lot of the work that I do in the community. Going back to voting, it's so necessary. I don't know why we don't invest more money in it. The IE is dying of need of more money for not just immigration work, civic engagement. We used to have, and I used to be the Riverside Regional Coordinator for Mi Familia Vota. We have Hector here. And then I moved on to being the executive director for Centro del Inmigrante, which I still share the same learnings and knowledge of how do we get our community engaged. What happened there? If you have the power to vote, who do you vote for? What do we give up in the return of what? I live in the city of Paris. I'm making a name of my city because my city deserves more. We all deserve more. We've been giving crumbs. I'm sorry to say it. But that's why I'm here today, to let you know we don't deserve crumbs. We are the gold of everything. If we change that mindset from the farm workers, we are the ones that take on all that work because we're resilient. We survive, we will continue to survive, but we all need to be on the same page. Leadership, I'm in a place of leadership. What do I do? I know I'm taking a long time. But what do I do with my leadership? I've been taking a lot of trainings with diverse, equity, inclusion, DEI. Why do you think they want to take it away? Because we create inclusion for not just for staff, inclusion for the board to make sure that it's diverse, inclusion of the community that we serve, not just Latinos. We have Asians, we have Blacks, we have all colors. But yet again, we forget our power. If we would just work together, how much more we can do. But yet again, I'm here to offer my support. Our region is big in 2 counties and not enough money. And I'm one of 5 delegates that came out here. But, whatever I can do to share as, I was a youth, believe it or not. At this age, I was really trying to figure out what FAFSA was. But I made it, and, I'm here to share the wisdom and resiliency because I'm not just fighting for me, but I'm fighting for my parents. I lost my father during COVID. We can't lose no more. We lost already. I'm sorry, that's it.
Yeah, so I was going to touch on the point that you mentioned about people and why they don't want to vote. And I always remember, Martin Luther King had a quote about black people. He said, we are not free until people in the South can't, we are not free as long as people in the South can't vote and people in the North feel like they have nothing for which to vote. And I think that's where we're at right now, where unfortunately we have to recognize that, speaking directly to the Democratic Party, because it has been the party that historically has tried to cater to Latinos, they have failed time and time again while being in leadership. And the community realizes that, and the community loses hope. And if you see the conversations happening right now, many people voted for Donald Trump last election, not because they support Donald Trump, but because they were just so tired of the establishment Democratic Party, which time and time again has been in power and has failed to deliver. Every time I see the news and it says someone who's been here for 20 years got picked up by ICE. I'm frustrated at Trump because that's messed up, but I'm also frustrated at the past administrations because how's it possible that in the past 20 years nothing has been done to protect these people? So we're not dumb, we're not stupid. We see that we have helped elect parties and we have elected people and who have been in power, and then once being in power just haven't delivered on their promises. So that's the first thing. The second thing we have to realize, and this is a bit controversial to say here, but we're always hearing, representation matters, and the more Latinos we have in power, the better we'll be. And I don't think necessarily that's the case. I think the right representation matters. Just put an example. Do you think we would be better as Latinos if Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio were president and vice president? Absolutely not, because it doesn't just matter, oh, you're a Latino. You have to be someone who actually cares about the community. And unfortunately, in the Latino community, we have an issue where there are many people who, they do well off, they get better off, and then their goal is not going back and helping the community. It's getting as far away from the community as possible. And as long as we have a system like that, it's just not going to help us. So I think we need to, really start doing the ground level work, meeting people where they're at, but also finding leaders who actually care about the community and not just, getting as high as they can no matter the cost. Because, like I said, people get tired, people get frustrated, and people get disillusioned. And you ask the majority of Latinos nowadays, and they feel like the political system just doesn't work for them. They rather stay home, not vote. They're just completely disillusioned with everything going on. So I think we need before we can talk about how can we go forward, we have to first look backwards and say, where have we gone wrong? And we need to hold those elected officials accountable and even hold ourselves accountable within our community, whether it be within organizations, whether it be in local government, county government, state government, wherever it may be. And then we can start having the conversation of, okay, now where do we go from here? But yeah, it just has been many, many years and decades of mistreatment and lies and abuse, and people are fed up with it. And I think that's what we're seeing today, and it's how we got to where we are now.
Thank you, Carlos. That was really good. I just want to add to that this mindset that we have of coming from deficit, we don't have enough, there's not funding here, there's organizations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is something that is holding us back. We need to start asking ourselves, what if money was not an object? What can we do? There's so much that we can do. And I think that right now in front of us is an opportunity for us to start innovating the new systems that are going to work for our communities. If we continue to try to mold ourselves into their systems and play by their rules, then we're always going to be in the same place. So I think that from now, we are going to start saying to folks, I remember one time I was in middle school and I was going in a field trip, and part of it I had to share a bed with another girl. And when I got to that hotel, she threw the pillow to the floor and said, "You're sleeping there." And I slept on the floor the first night, and the next day I picked up the phone and I called my mom. And I was crying, and she was like, "Why are you crying?" And I explained to her, and she said, "Gabriela, tú te haces respetar. Gabriela, you make yourself be respected." How many of us fund the companies, the organizations, the systems with our hard labor that are the ones that are disrespecting us? When are we going to make ourselves be respected? We have the power. We have the power, folks. But we are putting ourselves these blinders and are having this mentality of deficit when we are just human beings and a community of abundance. So we need to move past that, right? And I do want to say that it creates an echo chamber every single time that we start talking about it. I just came from a conference where I was trying to disrupt as much as I could, and I was like, I'm sorry. I'm going to fight this fire with fire. I am done being submissive. Haven't been really submissive since I was a little girl. My poor parents. I was such a rebellious kid. But I'm happy that, we have that fighting spirit, and we have to find it within ourselves to fight back and not allow for these government monies and all these things that we rely on to help us figure out ways to support and help our community. And I'm not trying to say it's going to be easy. It's not. It is difficult. And I know there are people and organizations that have to let go of folks because they're not getting the funding, that they're trying to figure out how to reinvent. I am there too. Our organization, every single year, has to have $45 million to be able to send our students to college. $42 million of those come in and out in scholarships, and the rest is operations. I am there. But I am more determined than ever to ensure that dreamers have access to education and that we fight back, because I know the power of knowledge. I know the power of education, and no government, no governor, no policy, no institution of higher learning is going to push back the desire of us as human beings to have academic freedom, to have our dreams realized. And that's where the energy comes from me, and I hope that you find that energy from you of how you fight back in this moment, in this time. I think we probably, let me see, how much time do we have? So we are 4:42. We don't want to keep you too long. We know some of you have to go, and we really appreciate it. So we'll try to be really quick and brief, please, with your questions, and we will try to be quick and brief with our responses. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susie Plasencia. I'm a Latina leader in the cannabis industry. I'm an entrepreneur, but I also founded Latinas in Cannabis, which is now the largest organization in the world dedicated toward empowering Latinas in the cannabis industry, but also as a lighthouse to help so many Latinas know that, they're not bad people for consuming and that there's a place for them in this multi-billion-dollar industry. So this question was originally for the panel, Juana included, and I would love your thoughts on this, Gaby, specifically. So as I mentioned, cannabis is now a multi-billion-dollar industry in the US, and millions of Latinos work in it. From cultivation to corporate leadership, yet stigma and federal illegality continue to create unique vulnerabilities for our Latino community. Many younger Latinos in particular view cannabis legalization and the creation of safe, stable, and equitable career pathways as a key political priority. We've seen tragic examples of these vulnerabilities, such as the ICE raid that happened in California just a few weeks ago, resulting in the death of a Latino worker. Given that this issue is impacting our Latino community in an economic and human rights level, what advice would you give to the generation of Latinos seeking to make civic engagement and impact and policy change in an industry that remains federally illegal? But again, our Latinos, we're in it. We're dealing with the reality of it. We can't wait for legalization to hit for us to have real advocacy. Our people are being impacted. I'm being impacted. This aspect of funding, right? As much as we want to acknowledge it as it, maybe we don't need it to create impact. Latinas in Cannabis, we're the largest organization doing what we're doing. We are not acknowledged by the bigger funding sources as doing the impact that we really are. And so I think as a Latina leader, I'm hitting a wall, but I know that so many other Latinos as well, we want to be acknowledged in the room as a multi-billion-dollar industry that we really are.
I'm going to start charging you guys for these advices, but here we go. One, it's narrative, right? Narrative is so important in everything we do. The stories that are told since we're little kids, right? That's all narrative, and that's what we know. Here's what I know. Before, there was pastillitas from the pharmaceutical company helping alleviate pains and things that we had, our abuelitas and our ancestors were using plants to do it. And where do the pastillitas and all this stuff come from? From plants, right? But people don't know that, and people don't know those stories. And the narrative that we have around this is all around the, just say no, and all these different campaigns. And we try to fight back those narratives, and we fall into the hole, right? When we know our stories, when we know the impact that it has in our lives. That's one. Number two, can you make it not smell so strongly? Because if it wasn't for me, I needed a little bit of humor. I'm like, ooh. I want to say, right, when in 2016, I was suffering from like so much pain. I had to have back surgery. I didn't want to have back surgery. And it was my grandparents who were telling me, if you have a pain, put some marijuana and alcohol, let it ferment, and then put that in your back. And let me tell you, that helped more than anything, okay? So I personally understand and know, right? But again, those are the stories that are very powerful and that need to be. And not you, but the industry trying to fight within the narratives that are very powerful, being told, right? That's where I think we fall into the holes. And so my advice to you, and my advice to everyone is, you write your own story. You tell your own story. And your story is the story that connects with others. And that's what's going to make people understand your industry and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've been doing Follow Latinas in Cannabis. Anybody's interested? Thank you.
Make it smell better.
Hi, my name is Leslie. I'm a current college student at a PWI in the Northeast, and I also grew up in a really white, conservative town in rural Maryland. Well, at this convention, I've met a couple of young adults who are also in that same situation, like they're attending a PWI or from really small towns. I guess my question is, like, what advice do you really have for Latinos who are in that situation when it comes to advocating and speaking up and making space for Latino issues and voices, especially since we don't really have, institutional access, or we can't really rely on that idea of like, oh, there's power in numbers, or we really can't easily access organizations like LULAC.
All right, I can go. So I went to a small liberal arts college in Poughkeepsie, New York. I went to Vassar College. And, one thing I learned while being there is the importance of staying connected to where you're from, your family, and those around you. And honestly, just getting off of campus, because it's really interesting, So the demographics of the campus itself, there was a very small Latino population, but you would go to any restaurant or anywhere really off of campus, and you would see Latinos everywhere. So I think a lot of college students just limit their experience so much to just the college campus when there's so much work to be done in and around college communities. But even then, I think more important than that is, seeing the fact that you're one of the few at an institution as almost a badge of honor and something that motivates you even more, because, the reality is 50 or 100 years ago, there would be zero of us there. So the fact that, things are growing and changing, maybe not at the pace we wanted to, but they are, use that to set a good example, to study hard, work hard, so you can open the door for many others. And what I've noticed at a lot of these institutions is, the more success we have in them, the more, it opens the door for future generations, because then you become part of the alumni network, and then you can help recruit in other communities that before, weren't being tapped into or just weren't being spoken to. So I think really it might be seen as a bit of extra pressure, but I think it is, and that's a good thing. You have a responsibility for yourself and those who come after you to do a good job, to get good grades, and really those frustrations and those problems that you see, really internalize them and help those guide you. So you say, hey, in 10, 15, 20 years, I want things to be different, and they're going to be different, not because I'm going to wait for it, but because I'm going to go and actually do the work myself. So I think, yeah, just wear it as a badge of honor and almost as an inspiration and as a motivator when you feel like you can't or, you want to give up. Remember that if I'm not here, then none of us are going to be here. So I might as well, put in the work and finish strong. And like I said, obviously try to, be involved as I can. When I was a senior in college, I was a student body president. I think I was like the first Latino to ever be student body president there. But like those are the changes that matter. So get involved and don't see it as a negative, see it as a positive. Like I'm here to stand out, and also use your background, as something. A lot of times we frame it as, oh, we come from these backgrounds, it's a disadvantage. I think it's an advantage because you see the world in a way that most students at that university don't see it. So it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, and use that to, keep going forward. So, yeah.
And I would add that it's also an advantage to be in those spaces. So one of our scholars, Jimena Arias Cristobal, was detained. And she comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. And when you hear her speak, right, she's like, has the most thickest Southern accent I've ever heard. And she was able to like change and start changing viewpoints in mind, and because she comes from that community. So it is an advantage sometimes, right, to be, I come from a very conservative home, right, South Florida, the politics are very different. And I've used that to my advantage to be able to be in rooms and spaces where I'm accepted because I can talk their lingo, right? I came from a Southern Baptist kind of church, so I can do the baby Jesus language talking, right? Like the Christian talk. And so it is an advantage. And in those spaces, being able to, like, you already have a pass inside of it, it's not a disadvantage. And so what I would say to folks, right, is that I don't know why, like, it's scary for people to see us. And maybe there is this fear of the replacement theory and et cetera, right? And this has been a human thing. It's not a construct of just one. We see it within our own communities, right? Let's be real, right? Colorism and racism and all this stuff exists in our own communities too. So, but I think it's important to, for individuals to start deconstructing those, and those are like having these conversations and tough and uncomfortable conversations, and being able to be within those white spaces, right, and say we're not these scary aliens, right, that are gonna come and replace you. Like, it's not a competition, right? We just want to be recognized for our humanity, for being people, and just live our dreams like anyone else, right? We're not trying to replace you. That is not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to make you learn Spanish or eat salsa. Like, that's not what we want. If you want to, you're gonna have a great time, right? Come on, let's be real. But I do think it is an advantage.
Hi, my name is Daniela Sarabia. I'm a rising second year at UCLA, but my hometown is Palmdale, California. And this past year, I worked on a coordinated campaign for my congressional district. It was a Republican district. We wanted to take the seat. And in having conversations with people while door knocking, phone banking, there were a lot of Latinos that it felt like, in a way, like self-hate. They were like, no, we want people to be deported. They're criminals. We don't want these people here. And I found myself becoming very frustrated with these people because you're Latino. If it wasn't your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your parents, they came from somewhere else. They were immigrants. So why are you so self-hating, and why is there this like lack of understanding in where people come from? And I also have noticed that in my high school there was a lot of Hispanic, Black people. It was a very low-income high school, and we didn't have the opportunities to be civically engaged. And a lot of people that I talked to, they just didn't feel like they were going to be accepted in those spaces, and they thought that it wasn't cool to be civically engaged. And I just found myself becoming very frustrated talking to these people, and I was just wondering if you had any advice on how to handle these tough conversations with people that are so closed-minded and don't want to like change their mind, or are open-minded into accepting that you sometimes have to be that first person that speaks out about something and not be scared, or how to find the people in these spaces that maybe want to speak out but are too scared to in fear of being judged by others.
Ye- Yeah, so I think the first is realizing that, we are a very divided community along a lot of lines, of nationality, country of origin, how long we've been here, first generation, second generation. There's so many divides, the education divide. I mean, so that's the first thing, recognizing that those, divisions exist. And then second, understanding, I mean, people don't like to hear it, but we are a very ignorant community. If you look at the statistics, many people in our community just don't, understand basic history. I mean, I get a lot of, for example, right now people, we're losing our constitutional rights, and I've run into so many people who don't even know what our constitutional rights are. So I think before we start to change people's minds, we first have to do a lot of legwork, and us being the ones who have the ability, whether it be the resources or the tools to do it, to educate our community in a way that, we need to understand the history of this country. We need to understand how politics works, how the Constitution works, and then that in and of itself, just educating people about those basic concepts will lead to a lot of transformation in how we view things, because right now there are many people in our community who see things very one-dimensional. This is good, this is bad, and they don't see the nuances of, this is exactly the strategy that Donald Trump wanted to employ. He wanted us to be fighting with each other. He wanted us to be mad at each other, but you're not able to see further than that if you don't have that basic understanding. And essentially the way I see it is like, your education is the foundation you build everything off of. And if you don't have that basic education, I'm not talking about like, oh, everyone has to have a college degree and be doctors, but I think there are things that we need to educate, and I think we need to do a lot of work in the civic education and understanding. Now, the other part is understanding too that many people's frustrations are valid, and they might not come off as valid, but this is one of the hard conversations I started having around 2021, 2022. A lot of people would say, hey, mira, Carlos, yo he estado aquí 20 años, 30 años, and I feel frustrated because I've been here my whole life and no one has ever given me anything. And now I see someone who just got here, gets a work permit, and then they get a free hotel in New York City. And at first I'd be like, oh, these people hate other immigrants. But then I started to think about it, and I'm like, hey, well, they're kind of right. I would be frustrated too. I think they're frustrated at the wrong people because it's not the immigrants' fault, but their frustration is valid. It's just how can we redirect that frustration? Because, yeah, you have every right to be frustrated that you've been here your whole life and you don't have any sort of legal status. And I would get frustrated too if I turned on the television and saw all these things going on. But you have to understand that this goes to the education part. It's not the guy who just crossed the border's fault. It's a bigger system that's working around it. So maybe not invalidating people, say, hey, what's been successful for me is, hey, I understand you're frustrated. I understand you're mad. But you're mad and frustrated at the wrong person or at the wrong group of people. And so I think if we're able to, understand, but then also redirect the conversation, that's a very big step forward, because even then, like, not just on immigration, like economic issues and other issues, I see it a lot, like especially, with internal racism. I see it a lot, in Texas, like, oh, I'm frustrated porque a nosotros los latinos no nos dan nada, y a estos le dan esto y lo otro. And I understand you're struggling economically. I understand you're frustrated about it, but it's not your neighbor's fault. It's not the other guy's fault. This is a system much bigger than, fighting with your neighbors. So I think we have to see it from two ways. One, we have to educate, but at the same time, we also have to understand that people's frustrations are real, and how can we redirect the conversation. So I think those of us who have that ability to see the world in a different way, go off to college, get a higher education, have these opportunities to come to conferences like that, then go back to our communities and do that work, and always doing it from a place of understanding instead of being judgmental, because that would happen to me a lot when I started going off to college and then law school. I would come back and hear some people speak, and I'd be like, wow, these people are just like they don't get it. But then I'm like, but they also haven't had the opportunities that I've had. And if I had grown up in their environment and had the same limited opportunities they had, I would probably think the same way. That doesn't mean they're a bad person. That doesn't mean I'm better than them. So how can we still have these conversations and disagree and move forward together instead of, becoming just so elitist essentially and saying, oh, these people are stupid and I'm smart, and that's just the end of the conversation. It's much more deeper than that.
And I'll take it a step further to say that I think the people in this room and the people that do this work, for me, are very special because we actually have a very different level of empathy. And human beings are in a spectrum of levels of empathy. And some folks, through what Carlos said, right, the education, the civic education, can get there. And I look at in my own family, and I think about, why am I more caring about certain things? Why did I pay more attention about the elections? Why did some of my family members actually vote for Trump and say, well, I only care about my economics and I only care about me? And I was like, wait, I was thinking about, I care about others and I care what's gonna happen, right? So it is in my mind, like, and this is now psychology, and I hope there's people that can do some research on how we can meet people where they're at to help them understand, and then also us understand that we're not gonna be able to bring everyone along, and that there is going to be different viewpoints and different mentalities, and unfortunately, right, there's just people that don't really care and are very, very self-serving, and it's about themselves, and they're selfish, and it's all about them and their family and their immediate family. Because let me tell you, I just cannot understand how I have family members who have undocumented parents and voted for Trump, who knew our struggle, right, and voted for Trump, but they didn't care.
Hi, sorry. My name is Jose, and I'm a student at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I grew up in the very deep rural South, and my question is, how does one go about building political infrastructure within rural communities who have never really had that before, in comparison to areas, for example, like the Southwest and Texas, who have been able to have major unions come in. In the 90s was whenever agricultural booms occurred in the South. So how does one coalesce that power now with everything going on, and how can we make sure that we're fully creating powerful infrastructures within the South?
Parties. I'm serious. Parties. I used to organize, when I was 19 years old, agriculture communities. I would drive up from Miami to Central Florida, and in order to get the community to come out, we would party on a Friday night, we would party Saturday, and then on Sunday, they would come out and they would listen. So, you gotta get creative, brother. But there is the possibility, and there is power in organizing. There are tools, right? And it really is just about the connection that you can make with people and just gathering, right? Bring out some chelas and some things or whatever, some good music, and people will come.
I would say, obviously, maybe I'm a bit biased, but I think right now the best way to organize, especially in rural communities that are so disconnected, is through social media. And I say that because I'm infiltrated in a lot of little local pulga groups on Facebook, because I always find the best information on there. Like, for example, I'm in groups in rural Arkansas and in rural Louisiana, and that's where they're posting real-time updates of where ICE is at, what's going on, because what makes rural communities different than big cities is just how divided geographically people are from one another. But social media has really broken down that barrier in many ways. So that's the first one. I think the second one is really understanding your community and not trying to come in with ideas that come from other places. Like, for example, one thing I've noticed in Texas, things that work in New York City probably aren't going to work in, the country in Texas. And that doesn't mean New York City is better or worse. It just means that they're different. So what I see a lot of when it comes to organizing is people wanting to come into rural or more conservative communities and trying to radically transform people's way of lives. And many people live in rural communities because they like the fact that things don't really seem to change. People just stay the same. And so if you come in trying to impose all these major changes, then you're going to lose people. So you have to understand that, maybe not everyone's values are going to align with your own, but that's okay. Where can we find common ground that we agree on and move on from there? And then the third one is just, meeting people where they're at, quite literally, every community, even if it's rural, has places where people come together, whether it's like a farmer's market or una pulga or, some restaurant or some whatever place. And you just really have to go do the work and do that. I think nowadays a lot of people like to do basically armchair activism where you just don't move from your house, you stay inside. And that can work in some cases, but at the end of the day, if you look back at the history of organizing and going back to political parties, I think that that's what's been lost, especially within the Democratic Party. There used to be a time where you would just go and knock on people's doors and have events, in the community. And I think a great example of that, who I'm maybe biased because I'm from Texas, but I think Beto O'Rourke did a really good job of doing that, going to the most rural places. And nothing replaces a face-to-face conversation, even if it's one person, two people. It's really just about getting out there and meeting people where they're at, going to those places, and being willing to have those difficult conversations. I mean, even on the issue of immigration in Texas, I talked to a lot of, non-Latino people who, they support Donald Trump because of the issue of immigration, but the more you talk to them about it, the more you realize that they're hatred towards, immigrants is based in misinformation because they grew up their whole life listening to radio, talk shows, and Fox News who make them believe, they genuinely believe that everyone is, MS-13 and all this stuff. And then you start having conversations about the issue. So that comes back to what I said before, if you try to impose and think you're better than everyone, and just understanding that people, even if they think different, it's not because they're bad people, they just grew up in a different environment. It's like a quote from Abraham Lincoln. They asked him about, what he thought about the troops from the South. And he's like, I can't hate them because they're us if we had grown up in their environment. So a lot of times people, you have to think, hey, this guy might come off as kind of racist, but if I had grown up in an all-white family in the middle of the country in the South, I'd probably be the same way. Would that mean I'm a bad person? No, we just come from different backgrounds. So I think a lot of times activism has just become so much like a litmus test of like, oh, you think, or even around language, oh, I've talked to a lot of people. It's like, yeah, I support, deporting illegal aliens. If I was, another type of person, I would end the conversation right there. But I kind of am able to see past that. And then you get to the point that, hey, maybe they're not using the right language. Maybe they're not saying the right things. But they're not bad people. They've just been misinformed. They've been misguided. Or they just haven't seen the world the way I've seen it. And that's okay. So, yeah, I think that's especially important in rural communities. Because even to this day, the infrastructure is just not there. A lot of people just aren't getting the right information. They're just getting Fox News and radio shows. And, I mean, that's all not the best information. But, yeah, that's what I would say as my advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's the last person,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken.
We did it. Carlitos, we did it.
Yeah, we did it. We did it.
So to the 40 of us in this room, I counted you all too. Thank you. Our tech team, woo! Yes. I just want to say thank you. Super grateful that you gave us the opportunity to answer your questions. Carlos and I met a couple of years ago. We have a dear friend in common. And it's just been such a pleasure being able to work together and to have done this. I think should we take this on the road? I think so, huh? No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna be his political manager, and we're gonna run him for something. But I wanna end with a quick story. So during the Trail of Dreams, which was the walk from Miami to Washington, DC, we were walking through the South, right? They say that in Miami, they say, to get to the South, you must go north, right? So you go up to like Broward, West Palm Beach, and then you hit the South. And there was a conversation we were having, and a man kept on interrupting our conversation. And he was really angry, and he was talking about how he was a vet, and how it was immigrants that were taking away all these services that were owed to him and to his family, and particularly his wife. And he you can see he had a lot of anger, and he was one of these people that were like, the illegals, illegals, illegals. And when he would say illegals, one of us would say undocumented. And he would say illegal, undocumented, right? And we tried during that hour and a half conversation that we were trying to have with this man interrupting us to acknowledge, correct the misinformation that was being said. And then there was other people, and we were in South Carolina, and we were talking to a whole bunch of white people, and he was there. And the other people started getting mad because he was interrupting so much that we couldn't really have a good conversation and dialogue, but he finally started toning it down towards the end, where the last thing he did was raise his hand, and we were like, oh, progress, right? Well, it turns out that his wife had cancer, and he made, like, I don't know, $100 too much to be able to be added into this list, to be able to get support so that his wife could get the transplant she needed. And at that moment, right, I realized how much pain this man was in, that the love of his life, the woman that had been with him his whole entire life, was dying, and he needed to find someone to blame for the pain that he was feeling, that he couldn't help her. And again, as Carlos said, right, it's these systems that make us fight with each other. And we need to explain and make sure that people understand we're not the enemy. And so before leaving, he rose his hand and he said, I just want to apologize. I want to say I'm so sorry for the way I came in this room. Please, everything that I said, just throw out the window. I was so misinformed. And it was at the end when I went up to him and I said, can I give you a hug? And I hugged him and he cried. And he shared, right, how afraid he was of his wife dying. And so a lot of what we see in our world comes from pain, comes from fear. And we have the antidote for that. And you all know what it is. What is it? Love. So wherever we go, let's carry that love that we have for each other. Let's carry that love that we have from our parents. Let's carry ourselves with the love that we have for ourselves. Thank you so much for being here with us and for putting up with us.